Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vince Manuele Show. I am your host, of course, Vince Manuele. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I started this podcast by exposing failed pastor Mark Driscoll. So I thought, what better way than to bring back the podcast than with an update on the Trinity situation, as it's been 2 years since everything went down, which is crazy. It doesn't feel like 2 years, maybe a little. So yeah, let's get right into this podcast. I'm going to be bringing them back, so I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. Okay, so since everything has gone down the past 2 years, Driscoll has made some pretty petty remarks in his sermons the past few months. And disclaimer, I don't watch his sermons. This is just stuff that's public knowledge. It's on the news. It's on Julia Roy's. She reports on the crazy stuff he does and says. So I think this was back in October. So Mark has always been trying to make excuses for Mars Hill. He's never really apologized for it. He never really said what went down, even though we all know. It's all really just kind of been blank statements like, oh, I feel bad for what went down there. Just stuff that isn't actually true. He doesn't care. And now he's changing his story again and saying the reason he stepped down on Mars Hill was because he prayed to God if he should. And get this, God told him that there was a trap set up, and that his elders were planning on basically saying that he was committing adultery, and they were going to accuse him of that. So basically it would turn congregants against him, and he would have to step down. God told him this, that this was a trap. Just sit on that for a second. So former elders of the church have spoke out in the past couple months. They said that's completely false. And all their letters to Driscoll, all they've wanted him to do was reconcile with those that he wronged, make things right. And that's one thing that Driscoll has never done. He preaches about reconciliation and forgiveness, and he's never done it to people at Trinity, people at Mars Hill, and even people in his day-to-day life, not in church. In my final communication with Driscoll, which was through email, he told me to attempt no more communication with his family and basically to go on with my life like they didn't exist, nothing happened, and my family was just like we died, like we were nothing to them anymore. He didn't try to meet with us. He didn't try to talk to my dad, any of my family. He just completely shunned us. And that's what he did to everyone else. He didn't try to reconcile. There's proof of all this. He didn't try anything at all to try to make things right, try to talk to us. It was basically, this is what I heard. It must be true. They're gone. And they kicked us out. That's what happened. And the reason that my family was the one that started the fall of Trinity was because we don't just do what we're told. We stand up when we need to. We fight when it's necessary. And the Trinity Mafia higher-ups, they don't like that because they want slaves. An example of that was there was another situation while we were going to the church. It was a few months before we left. When I was leaving the internship, there was kind of a fallout between my family and Pastor Brandon, the campus pastor, and the pastor of fun, Landon, who oversaw the internship. There was kind of a fight between us, and it kind of put us like in an awkward situation with the church. And there was one night I came home, I think it was a Wednesday night, and I got a call from Mark's daughter. And usually I don't bring her into this, but for the sake of telling the story, I have to. And I picked up, and she sounded upset, and she basically said, listen, I'm not allowed to talk to you until you reconcile with Landon and Brandon. Like, until you guys are all good with the church, we can't talk. And mind you, we were still going to the church during this time. So every time we went from talking every day to not talking for like 2 or 3 weeks. When I went to church, it was kind of just like awkward, looked at each other, and we couldn't talk because she just wasn't allowed to. We were controlled. So finally, my dad had to reach out to Brandon, and we met and made things right. And this was multiple times that it was us, the congregants, the members, having to apologize and going up to the pastors when that's their job. They're supposed to be making things right. Even if it was us that may have did something, which in this situation it wasn't, it was something stupid, it's still their job. The professional thing is for them to come to us, but we had to go to them every time to make things right. And it was ridiculous. It was all control. But in a recent sermon, Driscoll says, love and honor your Christian leaders and not contribute to gossip and lies, which is funny that he calls this stuff lies because there's proof of everything. There's proof of the 24/7 surveillance. There's proof of the excommunication. There's proof of forcing families not to talk to us. All that stuff is public knowledge. It's all released. There's screenshots. There's people that have backed up the stories. And again, he's never addressing the situation. All he said was, don't give in to the gossip and the lies. Don't contribute to them. And it's just stupid that the men at this church claim to be real men when they bow down to Driscoll and whatever he says. And it makes sense, and this is nothing against military at all, but it makes sense that all of his henchmen, or most of them at least, are ex-military because they're literally been trained to do what they're told. And it makes sense that they're the ones that bow down to Driscoll, like Caleb, the head of security, John Welnick. He's like the personal security to Mark. He like opens the door for him in his car, stays outside his house. That's just hilarious. And if Driscoll wasn't wrong in any of these situations, my question is, why didn't he just come out and address it? It's one thing when it was small, right? When there was just one blog post. Like if I was him, I'd be like, why am I going to address this? But when you have all these news outlets reporting it and all these blogs, and they made a podcast on it and they wanted to make a documentary on it, and you just don't say anything, it's suspicious. I mean, why didn't he just come out and address the situation? And instead, they just tried to cover it up. They went and told people, don't talk to the Manueles. None of what they're saying is true. And they're all telling all the staff there, all the staff was reaching out to us and said, we can't talk to you anymore. All the friends that I had there, I was friends with like everyone. And all of a sudden, they one by one just stopped talking to us. And it was interesting. Like, why are they not talking to us anymore? And then boom, we realized it's because they were telling all of them not to talk to us because we're these terrible people and we sinned and whatnot. And so now to get more recent, just because there aren't new stories every single day like there was before, it doesn't mean things aren't still happening at the church. I get messages almost daily from people who have been hurt from Driscoll in the past and recently. And people are still leaving this church on a weekly basis once they find out what's going on. And aside from that, we've been told that their attendance has plummeted. I have people that have went to the church, have checked it out in the past year, and it's not as big as they say. They always were saying, oh, we're up 300%, whatever, which was a lie because everything Driscoll does is a show. When I was going there, they'd remove seats on certain services so it looked more full. They'd pack it in, which was a fire hazard, but they'd pack it in so that it looks like it was 100% packed. They'd place people in certain areas for certain effects. Driscoll was only seen walking around campus when there was a camera on him, so he'd look like a social pastor like the time he went and handed out Bibles. Besides that, if there wasn't a camera on him, he was never walking around campus. He was up in his throne looking down at everyone, literally. He had this big window and he'd look down, and it was kind of scary. It's just ridiculous. Everything he does is a show. So I don't want to make this too long. So my message to people at Trinity is you're just pawns. You're money makers. Driscoll and his family are royalty, and everyone else is peasants. And if you just look at the fact, Driscoll's only job is preaching. He doesn't have other businesses. I guess you can count his real faith as a business, but even that, he calls it his ministry. So that's his only thing, and he doesn't have a mega church. It's not a huge church, yet this guy has multiple nice cars, a huge house. His family has private security. They fly private around the country, which is a fact. I was close to his family, and I've seen them go off on private jets. Does that seem like a normal pastor? It's not, because most pastors that have that stuff have been exposed too for stealing money from the church. And there's no one to keep him in check. At least those other people have elders. There's no elders. There's no one above him. The only people that could tell him what to do are on his payroll and wouldn't dare to say anything because they know what will happen. It's silly. It's interesting, isn't it? So that's what I leave you with. God's timing is perfect, and eventually the Trinity cult will crumble all the way, just like Mars Hill did, and it's already starting, and it already kind of has. And I have a few friends that still go there, and it's just sad because I won't name them because they're still there, but a few of them have straight up told me they know what went down, they believe what went down, and they still choose to go there because they're attached to it. And that's what cults want to do. That's what I'm going to leave you guys with. But thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you guys in the next one.